Ladies and gents, welcome back to another Engineers Podcast. Today we have Mahir, who's a principal engineer at Wise, formerly known as TransferWise. And we're going to be talking about some really cool things today that maybe you've seen on the pod in previous times. We're a fintech lover, but same but different, let's say. Building cloud native applications, and there's a really interesting project that Mahir and Wise are keen to talk about, moving on-prem services to a cloud native environment. We're going to be talking around regulations and some of the challenges around payments and moving money around, and also hiring software engineering. That's a really hot topic that I'm seeing being brought to the table on the podcast at the moment, and we're heavily involved in here at Engineers Artifacts and myself and the team. Mahir, thanks for coming to join us.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Pleasure. Do you want to give us an intro into who Mahir is and your background?
Cool. So I'm Mahir. I'm a principal engineer at Wise, and I've been with Wise for 4 years. I joined as a senior engineer here first, and at Wise, as a principal engineer, I look at the tech on Wise's debit card product vertical, and Wise's API for businesses product vertical.
Nice.
And yeah.
Cool. Do you want to give a better intro into Wise than I already have done? As in, it's way more sophisticated and complex than moving money around. So, do you want to give us your elevator pitch into who Wise are?
Cool. So let's go back to the origins of Wise, where Wise was founded by founders David and Christo, and they had a not so unique problem of where both of them were working in London, but David was being paid in euros,
Right.
and Christo had a mortgage to pay back home in Estonia in euros, while Christo was earning in pounds. And they found out that just using banks or any other money transfer service was quite expensive because they wouldn't use the mid-market exchange rate or the exchange rate when you Google something that how much is pound to euro. And their fees would be obscene as well. So they just figured that what they would do is that Christo would just give pounds to David for living in London, and David would give him euros at mid-market rate to pay his mortgage back home in Estonia. And they realized that, okay, this is a problem just between the two of them, but it's not a unique problem. It's shared by millions of us around the world. And that's how essentially Wise started. And so Wise is a global financial technology company, and we are present in a lot of regions around the world and move money and manage money across multiple currencies around the world. We have more than 16 million customers at the moment, and more
Wow.
than 60 banks who use Wiser services to offer to their own customers. And like over the last decade, we have just worked upon building local integrations with local scheme across the globe to make money movement very quick, easy, and very cheap, and using the mid-market rate.
What a story from two people to challenges around paying mortgages, exchange rates to 16 million customers and over 60 banks. That's phenomenal.
Yeah, definitely.
What a
It's
story. What have your last 4 years been like with Wise?
uh, so there have been few of the years where I've learned and grown as a person, as a professional the most because of the sheer amount of autonomy Wise gives you and the freedom it gives you to define your own role or figure out your own place in the company and doing what's most impactful to achieve Wise's mission, which is essentially make money movement quick, easy, and free, eventually free. And when I started off with Wise, I joined the debit card issuance product vertical.
Yeah.
And at that point of time, over a few months, we were like at only 3 or 4 people.
Right.
So the journey started off with essentially hiring and increasing the size of the team first. And at the same point of time, growing the product, launching it in more different regions, We had a massive monolith, which was a massive blocker for a lot of operations. So splitting that monolith into multiple services. And when I joined, we were in middle of our process of moving from on-premise to like a physical data center to using cloud. We chose AWS. So supporting that part of the process of moving debit card related aspects to AWS, and then um, a massive project of building our own debit card issuance platform rather than using third party partners.
Talk to me about that journey of moving your services from on-premise environments, physical data centers, to AWS. I know there are specific challenges in payments that it presents, which we'll talk about, but talk to me about that journey of moving those services and that infrastructure already to AWS.
Cool. So, as over, I'll talk more about Wise in general on what the problems we are facing with on premise. So, at that point in time, Wise as a business, we had to handle a constantly growing demand of our offerings. And we needed to extend our offerings to multiple regions as well. And at the same point in time, we need to keep our customers' money safe. We need to iterate on the product quickly, keep adding more features time to time. And we want the service to be functional and reliable most of the time.
Yeah.
And all of this can be achieved with physical data centers or varied degree of ownership of bare metal. But at that time, our goals was not to faff about trying to get a hold of our account manager of a vendor to fix a particular network card running our monoliths database, or handle a Monday morning load without actually going down and try and aim for a 395 SLO, and not having to travel to a different country where the data center was to perform various key ceremonies required for payments, or taking auditors with us for them to verify whether a data center is up to the requirement or not,
Yeah.
and supporting the product teams by making it easier for them to launch new services and database really quickly,
Yeah.
so that they can continue their effort of modularizing the monolith we have into smaller services,
Yeah.
and making deployments and rollback easier, and also shortening the time to launch new regions, uh, and integrating with the local regional schemes, which without having the complexity of finding a new data center vendor in those regions.
Yeah.
Now, all of this is completely doable with the data center, but if at that point of time, with a 20-person infrastructure team and 6 people in the security team, it just seemed close to impossible,
Yeah.
which triggered a move to AWS essentially.
Yeah. I can imagine there's quite a lot in there that I even didn't realize that you have to consider. I understand, especially for product teams, speed of deploying some of their services or new features, but actually being physically present in some of those locations to perform tasks. Even I didn't realize that.
Yeah, there would be multiple visits to data centers where you would have a hardware security module in which you have to go one by one with an operator and manually enter the keys. Then they come out, and you need an observer on the side who observes the process in an unbiased manner that nobody's leaking the key material, etc. And also the auditors verify the data center security and the processes, etc.
Yeah. Were you involved in that planning strategy about moving some of those services or all of your services to the cloud?
Yeah, so I was involved in moving our key debit card processing services
Yeah.
from cloud to AWS.
Talk to us about some of those challenges and what you learned from that.
So there are two there are two iterations to it. So the first iteration is that the initial draft of the debit card product was just 3 services, and we would use third party partners to do everything for us. So that's the first layer of it. And the second layer of it is when we built it in house, modularized it ourselves, and when we built it properly, completely over the cloud itself.
Yeah.
So the first step was that it was very dependent on the partner, because we would have VPN tunnels with the partner, and the on-prem, the partners in this space and financial services space. It's a very safe presumption to have that if you just assume that everybody assumes everyone has significant control over physical hardware themselves.
Yeah.
So any integrations or any connectivity which is built by any existing big player in the financial services assumes that you're functioning of a data center.
Got you.
So there, a lot of the effort was just working with a third party provider. In this scenario, we call them a card processor
Yeah.
them to figure out, okay, how do you want us to connect if we are on AWS? So this is how we do it right now. You want us to host this device, we run it in a data center, and we form this connection. But now we are in AWS. How do we connect a persistent, reliable connection
Yeah.
over cloud, where the resources are mostly ephemeral and they can just vanish and come back at any time?
Yeah.
So how do we restructure this particular part to work with you? So that was a 6 month long effort because it involved a lot of back and forth with the partner and the processor to figure it out. And the later effort of building our own, like getting rid of our debit card processing partners, was a much bigger effort and much more because
Really.
it had never been done before. Like nobody, Vice was the first and is
Wow.
who was the first who to run a debit card issuance processor completely on cloud because it
Wow.
wasn't even possible before that.
Talk to me about what that looked like, because when there's no support community to support you on any of those challenges,
Hmm.
that's a lot of unknowns you've got to navigate through. So talk to us about that journey.
So we used to issue MasterCard debit cards all around the regions, and across different regions, we would have different partners
Yeah.
with whom we would integrate and connect to help us issue cards. Now, card issuance contains of three massive components. One is actual issuance of the cards, which means the credit or debit card you have, the card number on it, the CVV on the back of it, two CVVs, one on the mag stripe, one on the chip itself, and the pin you set with it. So all of that is cardholder data
Yeah.
and actually issuance of that cardholder data. The second is saying yes or no when you tap your card. Like what happens when you tap your card at retail and saying yes or no to that. And the third is all back office operations, which is actually finalizing the money movement, settling the bill with the scheme itself, and also reconciling that what you paid out and what you got
Yeah.
matches up or not. So when we used to use third party partners, the connecting directly to the scheme was done by the partner, handling all sensitive information like card number CVV would be done by the partner because that requires a PCI DSS certification, which is a card industry specific security standard you have to follow if you were to process any cardholder data.
Yeah.
And connecting with the card manufacturers, like somebody who prints the cards and sends it back over to you. So now, if we were to build it all ours, now all the current processors use physical data centers, and that's how everything is done. Where the standard, the PCI DSS standard, is written keeping in mind that anyone who's going to apply for the certification would probably be using a physical data center
Yeah.
and manage it themselves. And the scheme also has all of their documents, all of the spec, everything written from the point of view of with an assumption that they run their own hardware. They have they can buy a payment HSM
Yeah.
to do these do the cryptographic operations themselves. So a payment HSM is something which is responsible for transporting your pin block, like encrypting your pin block in a certain manner. It also generates your CVV. It authenticates a request. It's payment specific cryptographic operations. So nobody knows how it's actually done because usually you just what you do is you just buy a payment HSM. You get a proprietary networking hardware from the card schemes, which is MasterCard, Visa, Amex, Diners, etc. And you put it in a data center which connects to the scheme. You get the request, you authenticate it with the payment HSM, and you do other stuff like say yes or no later on. So the biggest challenge was okay, what do we do with the hardware which we need to get with this from the scheme, which we need to host in a data center which we don't have any. And so there, Visa was an absolute star where we worked with Visa to develop uh, one of their product offerings, which is now Cloud Connect and available to other issuers, where we figured out a way where Visa will host their networking hardware in their data center on our behalf and offer it as a service to their issuers over
Smart.
IPsec tunnels. So that didn't require much of a change on Visa's side because they just run the same hardware, but in their data center.
Yeah.
But it involved a lot of innovation on how you could actually securely allow other card issuers to connect to them. And that was one massive bit of it. There was the other aspect of payment HSMs. Like, how do you, like a simple thing like the CVV is not randomly generated, which you have in a card,
Yeah.
or the PIN which you enter at a terminal is encoded and encrypted and transported over a certain format. So how do you decrypt it and decode it to actually verify whether it's your PIN correct, you typed your PIN correctly or not? And the algorithms and the documentation on how it's done is states back to 80s. So
80s.
80s, yes.
Wow.
And we were so first of all, the problem was we don't know what we had to do. Like payment edges, we spoke to different vendors, we spoke to Visa, they had to bring people out of retirement to answer our questions. We had to we spoke to few DSS auditors, we spoke to engineering team at Monzo to figure out what needs to be done over here. And over a period of time, we've got to know more and more things. And the biggest challenge still was just you don't know what you don't know. But we figured, implemented a software solution using a lot of massive test beds of test data, which we asked Visa to send us, so we can verify whether the CVV we are generating is accurate or not, whether we are processing the PIN correctly or not. And we use HashiCorp's Vault for and plugin system for that.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things that are on the tip of my tongue, and I wanted to understand why do you think Visa made that move to facilitate that for you? Because that felt as if it was a really pivotal move in moving some of your services to the cloud. So, why do you think Visa made that move for you?
So Visa has actually been a great partner where they like we're gonna support you in any way we can.
Okay.
And they also understood that it's time for them to expose these a lot. Increasingly more and more financial services companies
Yeah.
are going over cloud. And issuing wise, we were the first on acquiring wise. From an acquiring point of view, there are a lot of companies who run over cloud, like Adyen themselves and Stripe as well. So they realized that okay, this has to happen sometime or the other, and Wise, because we were also at such a state of where we didn't have any issuing uh, software already which worked, and we were building something out of our own. So they thought that we would be like the best partner to develop this with, test it out with, and go live with.
Yeah.
And they had recognized that it's an inevitability that they need to have a cloud offering. It was just about when, and they decided that we would be the best partner to start off this with.
There's something that's really interesting that's popped up, and for me anyway, reflecting on what you've said over the last few minutes, engineering through uncertainty, because when you started that project, you weren't sure if you could liaise with Monzo. This is my understanding and interpretation anyway. You'd be able to liaise with Monzo. We didn't know people from the 80s were going to come out of retirement. Sorry, people from Visa were going to come out of retirement working on stuff in the 80s. So, what is it like engineering through uncertainty? How do you do that as a team?
So as so engineering through uncertainty is that first of all believing that if we know what to do, we'll be able to do it. So that part is that because it's software, people
Yeah,
are, and there are we have known limitations with distributed systems, etc. So we know that okay, once we figure out what to do, we can do it. So it's figuring out what to do, right, or what we are missing, right? And through engineering through uncertainty is like being very clear with everyone around you that what you don't know, or you know that this functions, and drawing hypothesis and then trying and figuring out who you can speak to validate your hypothesis, or what is required, or what you know, what you don't know. And oftentimes the best people to tell you what you don't know is salespeople selling the services. So if you want anything, like if you want a database or any concepts. There would be salespeople who would come and tell you that, hey, we are selling this database and it does these things. You would find out a lot of new things which you didn't know about as a concept. You don't have to take them on their word on what it does or anything like that, but as a concept that exists. So, like for processing, we didn't know that we needed a payment HSM till we spoke to salespeople from processing providers that, hey, we provide you with an HSM. So we're like, oh, we need an HSM. They're like, yeah, you need an HSM. I was like, oh, what does the HSM do? You find out more about that. And
Okay.
yeah, I think that helped us quite a lot
That's a
because
really
there's a physical
interesting
incentive.
point. That's a really interesting point. I think to have the humility to hold your hands up and say, we know where we want to be. We think we have an understanding as to how to engineer a solution, but there's so much in between that we don't know. How do we navigate that and who do we speak to? That sounds as if that's a really important learning from some of this experience.
Yeah. And the other thing is just testing it, like just doing what you know, putting it out there on maybe various test beds, certifications, etc., which will also enable you to find out what you didn't know or what you missed. But doing it quicker makes that discovery quicker
Yeah.
rather than building a big thing which based out of hypothesis and testing it at a later date.
Yeah, I can imagine. You were touching on some points around encryption and cryptography. I can imagine those challenges were quite significant. Can we talk about some of those?
So uh, the older versions of PCI DSS standards was written that it assumed that everybody would have a hardware security module, which is
Yeah,
essentially stores secret key material on at a hardware level itself. And with more and more financial tech like companies who would need PCI DSS move into the cloud, HSM becomes sort of a very difficult thing to have. Cloud providers would have some limited HSM offering, but there would also be a payment HSM offering on top, which cloud providers do not have at the moment. Except right now, IBM has something, but AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, they don't have a payment HSM offering.
got you.
So that means that the operations which the HSMs were supposed to do, we have to do ourselves with an equivalent level of security, which is actually secure for our customers. Secondly, it also clears PCI DSS certification. So what that meant was that we had to figure out how to authenticate a card authorization request, how to generate multiple types of CVV your card might have, how to encrypt and encode a pin and decrypt and decode a pin over transit, and various other verification features, whether you're tapping your card at an authenticated till or not, etc. as well. So we PCI DSS over newer versions had started accounting for something called a secure cryptographic device, and which could be a software based thing where this was a very recent amendment to that, but it has to follow, and HSMs have different levels of security level requirements. So it's given by another national information security, some company, which is not company, some regulatory body, which is something like FIPS 140.2 level 2, level 3, level 4, etc. Level
Yeah,
4 is the maximum you can have. And PCI DSS requires level 2, for which there are a lot of solutions. Not a lot of, but there's HashiCorp Vault, which offers that, FIPS 140.2 level 2 compliance requirements on software itself. So we figured that we can use that and write plugins for payment specific cryptography aspects and use that as a secret store for key storage.
got you.
The other part is we had to invent key import ceremonies, like key exchange ceremonies, where the partners would send us keys to store, like Visa would send you keys to store to generate CVV. You have to send a key to the card manufacturer to decrypt the data you send to them. And we had to do this during lockdown because when you can't meet in person, so we had to figure out how we are going to design a key exchange ceremonies, because these things were never done. You just HSMs come with a fixed way of how you do key exchanges or key imports, but if you have a solution like this, you have to figure out how you're going to do a key exchange and key import.
Got you. It sounds as if with encryption, cryptography, especially in payments, it's pretty universal with HSMs and keys themselves. Were there any independent or isolated challenges that you found multi-regionally? In different parts of, let's just use Europe as an example. Were there challenges there that you were finding that were making it difficult to do this?
Uh, Related to card payments is pretty, except for US, all of the world is pretty universal on how it works with the card schemes, except for US. US is completely different ballgame on card payments. And there are challenges with local schemes like FPS and SEPA, which are again very
Yeah.
similar challenges, but they don't have a solution like the card schemes, because card schemes requirement is FIPS 140.2 level 2 compliance, which can be achieved on software based. But other payment schemes across countries have various other requirements on cryptography, where they require level 3, which definitely requires an HSM. Or if you do a 3DS check when you order online and you need to receive a one OTP, any provider in the card scheme who implements that functionality needs a level 3 compliance as well. FIPS 140.2 level 3 compliance HSM.
Visa's move then seems like a smart move, really, because any fintech that I see pop up nowadays, we spoke to Griffin a number of years back, and they're a banking authentication as a service platform. We've spoken to Adyen, where they were quite clear about they run their payments on an on-premise environment. But nowadays, everyone seems to be doing, let's just call it holistically, payments in the cloud. What would be your biggest learning that you would give to someone else if they're about to embark on this journey, do you feel?
The first thing will be that because you're doing something new, you really have to read the regulation in, or the standard you have to comply with
Yeah,
yourself, and break it down to the bare bone and break it down to its intent as well, that what are they exactly trying to achieve with this,
yeah,
or why does this requirement exist, and what is the way you can solve the intent of this requirement over cloud, because there is a good reason that these requirements exist. Okay, it's not globally applicable for everything, but there would be a reason why these requirements exist, and also what their what was the intention behind them. So, and trying to implement that intent onto your system. The other part is the auditor, whoever audits your system on whatever you're building, is a human person as well, to whom you can talk to and to whom you can explain it to. It's better if you get an auditor who already has experience or and understands cloud systems. That is one massive key thing where if you are getting an auditor who's never used to a cloud system, you'll have to explain a lot of new things and concepts to them. You'll have to explain Kubernetes, you'll have to explain service meshes, how do you do service to service communication, authentication, authorization, role based access controls, which cloud offer, or you get an auditor who already has experience with these things. And that is quite an important part. And you can explain you what you're trying to do, how you're solving a particular requirement of any standard or spec you're following. And also you can verify while developing the intent of the standard with your auditor or probably a consultant in that space itself. So rather than building something with your head down and then or getting it audited later, keeping an open channel of communication between an auditor slash consultant
yeah.
on what you're doing and getting feedback constantly on a design is going to be much cheaper and quicker and better for you.
That's really good feedback. And going back to your first point, I feel this more and more with the podcast. I think understanding the business logic and requirements and using the technology as your aid or support to supercharge you is really key. Really key. Help us understand more about Wise, more about your hiring strategy. If we move on to that, that's a big thing for us at Engineers, especially at the moment with macroeconomic situation, hiring, retention's a really, really hot topic. So talk to us about hiring at Wise and what that looks like.
So advice, we everybody who works has a lot of autonomy at every level. So that goes down to you as a contributor, to your team, to the squad or the product vertical you belong to, or the bigger department you belong to. So everybody has a lot of autonomy where everybody feels empowered enough that they can make a suggestion and it will be heard, paid attention to, and if they can make a case well enough for it, it will be executed as well. So because of that autonomy, what we do differently at Wise is we expect all of us software engineers to play a role of product engineer, and it's the same for our analysts, our designers, and everybody is a product analyst, a product engineer, a product manager, or a product designer. And every quarter, the entire team gets together and they figure out each and every one having a say in it on what they should build next, why they should build next, and then how they should build it. So apart from analyzing the technical ability of engineers or technical experience of engineers, we also look at their product mindset on whether they can reason about what uh, regarding a product, what they are building and why they are building it, or what they should be building or why they should be building it, and can they ask the right questions around that part. So we have multiple product managers interview and pair up and interview an engineer as part of their interviewing journey with Wise as well. And on the technical aspect, we realize that interviewing people will never be perfect, and there is a difference. There's a gap between a person's interviewing performance and their performance at the job, and we try and minimize that gap as much as possible by doing few things. We don't ask whiteboard lead code type of questions or programming puzzles. We try and figure out how they code in their most comfortable area and with real world problems. And the other part is we don't limit them that you can't use Google or you can't ask for help, etc. We try and act as a team member with them, trying to attack the same problem. And they can use Google, they can use IDE for coding, they can ask whatever. We don't expect you to have unrealistic condition what you won't have at the job. You'll always be able to Google anything, you'll always be able to use an IDE, etc. So we try and recreate that aspects during the interview as well.
That's key, I think. I think the interesting part is measuring the impact or measuring from interview into when they start at Wise. How do you feel you're able to do that? Because what you're trying to create is a real life team scenario setting, as in how they would act or cooperate with other engineers, or how they would actually find out something on Google. What's the measurement there in your eyes?
So a lot of the performance measurement aspects I'm not aware of advice altogether because I'm not a manager. So I don't exactly know. So I know for sure that somebody advice does actually look at that and is looking at that, but I'm not involved in that at all.
Got you.
Yeah.
Got you. But I think the first part is really interesting. Looking at a product engineering mindset, and I see this with businesses that are quite akin to yours, where you're building something for large scale users. I think the product interview is now becoming so important. How can you understand functional, non-functional requirements, changes in what you're building, as opposed to how do you just build a static application, leave it, no scale challenges, this won't change in a year, 2 years. Understanding that mindset of how people apply their thinking to something real life that customers use on a day-to-day basis, I would say is a really smart way to go and interview people.
Yeah, 100%. And uh, it makes a massive difference on how you even write a pure technical solution to anything as well. Like a sample example will be that suppose if you're implementing a feature that for every card transaction you do, you need to show logos of where you spend the money. And if you spend it at McDonald's, you need to show the McDonald's logo. Now, technically, it's quite simple. Like find a logo provider, send the name of the transaction, and get the logo and show it on the thing. Now, where the product mindset kicks in is that if the person building this realizes that, hey, Wise doesn't just do card transactions, Wise also does direct debits, Wise also does money transfers, Wise also uh, does peer-to-peer payments. So it's not just showing the logo of that card merchant next to the transaction, it's showing direct debit to Vodafone's logo in that scenario as well, and sending money to HSBC, then HSBC logo is there as well. And I think that's where then your technical design gets affected, because it's directly an impact of your product thinking. Because as a product, you realize that it's these things will wanted in the future as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I completely agree. I do think it's a really critical part of software engineering in today's day and age, and where the industry continues to move more, that engineers do think about the impacts that what they're writing has on customers. I want to wrap up for today and just say a massive thank you for coming to spend your time with us, sharing some of your secrets on what I know was a really, really complex move to the cloud, if you like, and how you navigated through that. And some of what you did was pretty cool and pretty interesting. And I think the hiring strategy for you guys and girls is really unique. And I'm keen to see what you guys and girls continue to do more of, and what you've done so well. What a story from mortgage repayments in pounds and euros to 16 million customers. So a massive thanks.
Cool. Thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure. And as always, a massive thanks from Engineers. What's key is we like, share, subscribe this content. It's important that people like Mahir, Wise, come and share their stories with us. We're massively passionate about this and want to continue to expand on some of the amazing stories that we've shared already over the last few years. So please tell friends, but please do click that subscribe button or like what we're doing. And a massive thanks again, Mahir, for joining us.
Yeah.
Bye for now. Hey guys, thanks for watching this episode. Massively appreciate you listening and checking in with us. If you want to find out more about us and what we're doing, please check us out on social media. What we're trying to do at Engineers is build a community to drive knowledge sharing and experiences. On Twitter, we can be found Engineers.io. It's no_. We've also got a website, which is engineers.io. These links will all be posted in the description. Any feedback and comments are massively appreciated. We're always looking to improve on where we can. Thanks, guys.